Hello, I'm Chris Hartwell, and welcome to the Hart Beat, the place where I talk about just a few of the things that make this little guy tick. Today, I'm going to be talking about my favorite films from 2015. Join me, won't you? Though most people have posted their top 10 lists roughly 2 months ago, I figured my tardiness would be slightly excused and justified since the release of this video kind of coincides with February 29th, which is, when the Academy of Motion Pictures Arts and Sciences deems it to be a solid time to reflect on the best films of 2015. Also, I wanted to say I have not seen every film from 2015, so if you're expecting to see films like Brooklyn, Carol, or Room on here, it's not that I have anything against one-word titles, I just haven't seen those films yet. Also, please note the title of this video is my favorite films from 2015, not the best films from 2015. So, though I might have actually given other films higher ratings than the ones on this list, I will assure you these are the ones that have excited, enthralled, mesmerized, and inspired me most from this last year. So, with that said though, let's jump straight on in, shall we? This film made my top 10 list after one sequence. Just watching that task force roll into Mexico armed to the teeth, surrounded by Mexican law enforcement, and yet still knowing that they were inevitably screwed. I mean, just bravo to Denis Villeneuve for some phenomenal direction there, and especially when they get to the border and they're just like, what are the rules here? We must be engaged to engage. Do what they do. If they get out, you get out. And then there's Emily Blunt's character who's just caught in the middle of this mayhem, completely in over her head, just going, wait, which is exactly how so many of us would respond in a situation like that. And actually, it was her point of view, for me anyways, that elevated this film to its place on this list, because the war on drugs and the struggle against those that find power in them is anything but simple. And this film just so boldly dove into those terrifyingly gray questions like, what if the legal course of action is actually doing no good at all in this situation? And actually, it's the illegal one that is. And not only was Sicario able to ask those genuinely important questions, but it was also able to tell an extremely engaging cinematic story, which was certainly helped along by its cinematographer, Roger Deakins. My goodness, that man's ability to so beautifully capture things that are so horrifying and ugly is just astounding. This film actually took 2 viewings to earn my unreserved love, as it just so squarely punched me in the emotional solar plexus the first time around. But on a second viewing, wow, does it have a lot to offer. And even as the plot at certain points approaches formulaic, for the most part it feels so much like a close blood relative of the Twilight Zone or the more recent Black Mirror. Its story and visuals just really getting under my skin and making me squirm, which again could be kind of off-putting initially, but like other films that have done that to me, whether it be Apocalypse Now or Adaptation, the more I sit with them and the more I kind of strip back some of those kind of initial gut responses, the more I realize the intention and thought behind it, and the more I am enthralled by it. And the precise and controlled direction from Garland, coupled with the very wild and unpredictable performances from Alex Vikander and especially from Oscar Isaacs, really did elevate this film in my mind, making it worthy of this list. I mean, that disco sequence alone so perfectly captured who that character was. His brilliance, his brokenness, his humanity, and his hubris. Good gracious, I have missed Steven Spielberg. And one of the things that I just loved about this film was watching him, even after 29 feature films, continue to stretch himself as an artist. I mean, this is the director of the wildly entertaining Raiders of the Lost Ark, Jurassic Park, Minority Report, and Jaws. And even his past dramas like Empire of the Sun, Schindler's List, and Saving Private Ryan contain sweeping narratives and heightened Hollywood emotions. And I mean that in the most praiseworthy way possible. Spielberg knows how to move an audience in a way that few other directors can even dream of. So what's been brilliant, though, about watching Lincoln and again with Bridge of Spies is just seeing how reined in and restrained he's chosen to be. On both films, there's just been such a level of quiet and stillness. But instead of that directorial decision leading to boredom or disengagement, Spielberg was actually getting the audience to lean in and pay closer attention to what he was presenting on screen. And I think more than any other film this year, Bridge of Spies was able to take what could have been considered dull or even plotting and make it iconic and memorable. I mean, for the most part, this film is 2 characters sitting in a room, or 1 character waiting in a line, or a few characters standing on a bridge. And Spielberg was able to take all of those things and make them meaningful, riveting, and powerful. This film wasn't just a giddy exploration of tightrope walking or even just a love letter to the Twin Towers. No, this was a full-blown celebration of art and creative expression in any medium. And I can honestly think of no better director to explore those ideas and themes than Robert Zemeckis, because I think it's an unfortunate thing that we as humans tend to judge the value and merit of any action based upon its practicality, its measurability, and its definability. But from Romancing the Stone to Back to the Future to Who Framed Roger Rabbit to Forrest Gump, Zemeckis has challenged that outlook, and he just cannot help but infuse his films with such a palpable sense of exuberance and joy. And once again here with The Walk, this film just oozes this man's love of storytelling, and for a medium that so powerfully and uniquely can capture and transport an audience, for no other reason than to capture and to transport them. Now, some people believe that it's a director's job to step back and be as invisible as possible in their art. I personally could not disagree more. I want to know why this director chose this specific project and chose to invest 2+ years of their life into it. And I just love on this film that I can see in Joseph Gordon-Levitt's eyes Zemeckis' glee. And I can see in that painterly framing and color his precision. And I can see in that use of 3D his imagination. And I can see in this story his passion. This film really surprised me. I had heard little to nothing about it, and prior to watching it, I was definitely no connoisseur of the Beach Boys. But afterwards, I went out and purchased pretty much every single one of their albums. And guys, biopics can be really challenging to get right, because whether you choose the cradle to the grave approach or choose to focus on a specific season in that individual's life, you will ever run the risk of either oversimplifying or sensationalizing who they are. And what Love and Mercy does, and what the best biopics do, is present as honestly as they can a portion of that person's soul, never once saying or even implying that that's all there is. And even more impressive still, actually inspiring me as an audience member to go out afterwards and learn more about them. And that's not to say this film wasn't emotionally satisfying in and of itself, because it absolutely was, which was made all the more impressive as it cut back and forth between two distinct parts of Brian Wilson's life and was still able to gain emotional traction in both places. And on top of that, this film tackled the breaking of a man's mind and just attempting to capture that in a way that isn't hokey or disrespectful is just really challenging. And I just thought that Bill Pullman did a great job in both the visuals and the sound design, just very subtly and respectfully and realistically capturing what that must have been like. And in addition to that, I have to compliment Paul Dano as well as John Cusack for just really phenomenally capturing who this person was and these two distinct parts of his life. There is something uniquely beautiful about film's ability to personify the inanimate, to give voice to the silent, and to clarify the abstract. And with Inside Out, Pixar has continued to do that in a way that few other studios have even attempted. I mean, they have gotten us to care about and to identify with the toys in our bedroom, the bugs in our grass, the monsters in our closet, the fish in our sea, and now the emotions in our head. And more impressive still was Inside Out's refusal to merely rest on the cleverness of this concept to carry it forwards. Now, don't get me wrong, the use of this concept with its emotion characters, control center, personality islands, long-term memory maze, dream factory, and imaginary friends is truly one of Pixar's cleverest. But none of those elements got in the way of a really well-told, genuinely moving story with iconic personalities, just striking imagery, and a very memorable journey. And like a memory that's both bitter and sweet, happy and sad, this film gripped me emotionally in the moment and held me intellectually as I walked away. In short, I loved it. Now, where Inside Out asked its audience to practically sprint to keep up with this non-stop, very layered gags, quips, and emotional jargon, The Revenant was probably one of the simplest films of the year, narratively, that is, because like Bridge of Spies, it's a very linear, straightforward narrative which revolves around the practically mute Hugh Glass really did invite the audience to lean in and to read the truth in that man's eyes and to observe the poetry in Inarritu's direction and Lubezki's cinematography. And for my money, he does indeed deserve the Oscar for the third year in a row. Regardless, just the truly astounding power and craft of all the departments on this film really did earn its place on this list. I mean, like last year's Birdman, without my even realizing it, this film just lured me into this really mesmerizing experience. Just the flow of the camera, and the invisible edits, and the sometimes cooing, sometimes screaming soundtrack just sucked me in to these characters' hearts and minds, and into this story, which is why I'm still thinking about that scalping, and that terrifying tumble off that cliff, and, of course, the bear attack. Now, due to all this excitement, I am unfortunately losing my voice, as you can tell, and I do apologize for that, but the show will continue. Now, with this next film, I can absolutely understand why certain people weren't huge fans of it. After all, its content is extremely violent, racy, and vulgar, its themes are undeniably overt, and its narrative is kind of simplistic. With that said, though, this absolutely was my cup of tea, not since Do the Right Thing has Spike Lee just blown my socks off like he did with this film. I think more than any other film this year, Chirac, both visually and emotionally, just so perfectly spoke to me as a human and as an artist, which is made all the more impressive because I really have no actual life experience with the subject on which this film focused, but just its emotional rawness and Spike Lee's decision to really kind of take these subjects head on with these grand monologues and this breaking of the fourth wall just so perfectly captured how my soul longs to connect with the world around me. And guys, I can so often feel small and helpless in this world, just buffeted to and fro by the brokenness around me and within me, to the point where sometimes I just want to scream and plead with those around me to recognize and to acknowledge the truth, but rarely do I have the courage to actually say something, and this film did that for me. And even in the midst of this hyper-stylization, it still managed to capture truth that moved me in a really profound way. And speaking of that stylization, just the way that Spike Lee chose to use color and light, rhythm and music was just so close to my own approach as an artist. Combinations that were explosively, dynamically, energetically, and uniquely cinematic, because there is color and light, rhythm and music in all of our souls, and I think one of the highest compliments I can give to an artist is that he created something that shone and pounded in time with my own. Simply put, Star Wars is the reason that I got into filmmaking initially. I love Star Wars, which meant kind of in a funny sort of way that The Force Awakens had the most stacked against it going into this year, because Disney had to do so much more than prove to me that they could be like the originals by constructing real sets, fabricating rubber aliens, shooting on location, or cutting together a good trailer, because at its finest moments, Star Wars has never been about checking a series of boxes that have been mandated by its screaming fans. No, one of, anyways, the reasons that the original was just such a titan at the box office is because it came out and gave the audience something that they didn't know they had been craving, just because they had spent so much time recently in things like Watergate and the Vietnam War. And it stuck around not because it was old, but because it was new. And yes, Lucas was absolutely riffing on Flash Gordon serials and paying homage to Campbell and Kurosawa, but his worlds, mythology, and characters were electrifyingly fresh, iconic, and captivating. And through them, not only has George Lucas brought me into his imagination, but inspired my own. Now, don't get me wrong, guys. I can enjoy J.J. Abrams and 1 to 2 viewings of his films just because they rarely stop to breathe. They're just go, 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 fun, 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 fun. But ultimately, when I do catch up with them, I kind of end up realizing, wow, these are absolutely heavy on personality and exuberance, but ultimately kind of light on anything visually, narratively, or thematically iconic, therefore failing to really kind of capture my imagination or inspire it in any lasting way. But then there is The Force Awakens, which I can say most of J.J. Abrams' problems are present in this film, but guys, let me tell you, I have now seen this film 5 times, and I hope to see it at least a couple more times before it leaves theaters, and I have liked it more and more each time. I just cannot get enough of the characters, the action sequences, the planets, and the story. Kylo Ren, this petulant child who hasn't yet earned his scars. Rey, this dreamer who doesn't quite understand her own power or the world that she's now entered. Finn, the man who's chosen to strip himself of the only identity he's ever had, constantly asked to face the truth of his motivations as they vacillate between fear and love. And that Falcon chase on Jakku, the revelation that Kylo Ren is actually Ben Solo, and his story being the fulcrum on which Han, Leia, and Luke, and indeed the entire galaxy has swung over the last 30 years, and that final lightsaber battle in the snow. And just on that first viewing, I could not believe, as minute after minute ticked by, that I was still loving the film as much as I was. And I think, in the end, the greatest compliment that I can give to Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens, is just like when I watched the original when I was 8 years old. I walked out of it thinking, I want to do that. I want to make films. Now, one of the reasons that this film just barely edged out Star Wars was, unlike The Force Awakens, I went into this film with really high expectations, partially due to the marketing, and partially due to just the current cinematic climate where irreverence and rebellion are king. There was this borderline hyperbolic love for this film long before it came out, which basically made me dare it. All right, impress me then. And then it did. Just these stupid, it's mad, it's furious, it's relentless, it's nonstop, it's out of control. They are all true. But what's truly phenomenal was just the fact that George Miller is always in charge of this film. Every single frame of this terrifyingly complex piece of choreography, from the camera work, to the actors, to the music, everything turns, screams, and pounds in time to the same precise heartbeat. Or to compare this film to an outstanding dance performance, there is found here not just jumps and spins, but dips and even stillness, which means that a film that is essentially one long action sequence never once pushed me to look at my watch or fatigue of the mayhem that was on screen. And pretty much in the hands of any other contemporary action director, that probably would have led to my cardiac arrest. But in the hands of Miller, you knew just how much fuel to spit into the engine of this film to keep me completely enthralled and alive from start to finish. And thus concludes my top 10 favorite films of 2015. Thank you so much for putting up my voice, guys. I would still love to know what your guys' top 10 films of 2015 were, so please comment below and let me know. Also, please do subscribe. I'm going to continue to review films and television on this channel, and I would love for you all to stay up to date on all of those things. But for now, I'm Chris Hartwell. This is The Heartbeat. Thank you for joining me.